Joey Gallo.
Week 1 is in the books, boys. We did it. It's been a long off season. We've been waiting for this finally to happen, and it is in the books. I am Dave Reed, joined by my hosts, Ryan Wilkinson and Joey Gallo. We're here, boys. Football started.
Yeah, we made it. Week 1 in the books. Finally have some real football to talk about, and happy we got Joe back as well.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's good to have a slate of games. Good to have some data points to make some decisions on for the remainder of the season. We're doing a lot of conjecture over the last couple of months. It's good to actually see some results. So although the results weren't exactly great, I think it was an overall pretty mediocre week by touchdown volume. We'll see.
Yeah, it was. We were looking ahead at a lot of players that we thought stepped up and disappointed, which we'll get into later. It's a lot easier to come up with a disappointed list, but in general, no matter what, good or bad, having football back is a positive. But with that being said, I guess like looking at week 1, what were some of the key things that stuck out to either of you? I don't know if Joe, if you have anything in mind that you wanted to start with.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall things started slow. Like the people that I was watching with, I remember we kind of looked at each other after it was almost the end of the first quarter across the board, and there were no touchdowns, to the point where we were kind of just like, oh, we should have just known to smash the under in the first half of all these games, because there was just kind of nothing happening. I think there were a couple teams that surprised me. I think I'll be interested to see. There's a couple kind of unanswered questions that I have in my mind, and some of them relate to teams that played better than I expected, some of them teams that played worse than I expected, and plan on hitting on many of them over the course of the pod. But yeah, it was good to have football. It wasn't the highest quality football, but I think better times ahead.
Yeah, I agree. And Dave and I were talking about it earlier. I think it was just a bit of a disappointment from a fantasy perspective. A lot of the guys that you thought were going to go off or you talked about all off season didn't really do too much. And as Dave said, it was a lot easier to come up with guys that disappointed than stepped up. And that just kind of shows you how week 1 kind of went overall.
Yeah, I agree, and we're going to get into more detail on some of the players, but some teams just in general that stuck out to me. Lions, obviously, they beat the Chiefs on opening night. No Kelsey there, but they did look good, and it was good to see Dan Campbell setting the tone early with that 4th down call, going for it in their own territory, really set the tone for the game. The Rams overall, I think, and we'll get into more, surprised. I think a lot of teams, as well as their opponent Seattle, who did not step up as much. My bold prediction for the Steelers is off to a rough start. We'll get into that later, but I think better days are ahead. I think Joey's bold prediction is looking a little bit better than mine so far with the Packers. Giants don't look good so far. And I'm sure we'll get more into the Jets game in general, but that was quite the roller coaster ride. It was very exciting for the one single game, but obviously season long and going forward is going to be a little tough. But I guess let's start off with some positive things, since it's been a very negative tone so far. What are some teams or players you guys think that stepped up? I don't know if Ryan, if you want to jump in first.
Yeah, so one I did have was Jordan Love. I was a little bit skeptical coming into the season, but he looked pretty good. He had 3 touchdowns. He did fumble once, but they recovered. I mean, the Packers put up 38 points as a team. He had 28 fantasy points. That's a huge start to the season for him. And for where he was being drafted, I think, if he's on your team, you're feeling really, really good about that right now. Another quarterback I had whose name didn't come up really much at all was Baker Mayfield. The Bucs took down the Vikings on the road. He had 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Not saying he had an amazing game, but he did have 20 fantasy points, and he pretty much wasn't talked about at all before week 1, unless it was about how he may not be the starter. So him as well, if you have him on your team, I think you're pretty happy after that game. And then Dave, I know you'll love this one, but Breece Hall, I think you have to mention him. Coming back from the injury, 10 carries for 127 yards. looked really, really good. Didn't get into the end zone, but didn't need to. They still pulled off the win, so you got to be happy with him as well.
Pretty crazy to have an 83-yard rush that was not a touchdown.
Not a touchdown, I know.
But he proves why his nickname is Brees Lightning. The guy is incredible. He touches the ball and it's like 20 yards immediately. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was nice to see the burst coming back off the injury, right? That was eating my words a little bit, saying that Brees was going to potentially be a little bit of a bust at his ADP, just because didn't really think he would have that kind of burst this early in the season, but he looked great.
Took 2 carries to get over 100 yards in the game. It was crazy.
Insanity.
Yeah, for me, the thing that probably sticks out the most is Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami Dolphins. I think that all off season, for the longest time, I had been kind of out on Tua with concerns over his inability to stay on the field. And then towards the end of the summer, in one of my main redraft leagues, I ended up with Tyreek Hill in the first round, and around the 6th or the 7th, I went for the Tua Tyreek Hill stack, and ended up with the most points in that league for week 1, and starting to think, right, like what do you do in this situation, right? Like Tua is now the odds-on favorite to win the MVP, and it's all based on just 1 week against a poor passing defense. Is this a time to look to trade Tua? Like maybe you could, like in a redraft, Tua for someone like Joe Burrow. Kind of feels like like if you could trade Tua right now, it's probably. I mean, I'm not looking to, but that's the biggest question. He looked fantastic. The offense looked fantastic. Tyreek Hill is unbelievable, and if he stays on the field, then that could be a league-winning combination that a lot of people were potentially afraid of. Myself being front of that list.
I think that's what it all comes down to, right? It's really a health thing. If he stays on the field and he plays an entire season, then yeah, you got a huge steal where you were able to draft him and he looks phenomenal. The health still is a concern, though, and I think it's still yet to be seen if he's going to make it the full season. But if he does, yeah, he could definitely be a league winner.
And we saw it last year too. Like this isn't like a flash in the pan. It's like week 1 just stepping up. Like we saw this exact type of stat line multiple times last year. So, and that was always the discussion. If he stayed, like you could get a discount on Tua. He's a good target later on if you want that upside pick. He's great for best ball where you draft a couple quarterbacks. I got him in a few best balls as well. I still would be shocked if anyone would accept the Burrow for Tua trade off for myself, but I would throw it out. Tough. I do think Burrow will be better in general, but it's hard to say who has the better weapons, actually, when it comes down to it. Definitely interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And, the Rams look great. You got to give them credit. I'm not 100% sure that is not fool's gold there. But, yeah, we'll have to see. For me personally, especially going into next week against San Francisco, that's a little bit of a tough spot where a lot of guys are going to be looking to play Rams, who just had a big week. But it was impressive. They looked good. They got some of their young receivers involved. The offense looked very, very capable.
Yeah. A couple other players who I thought stepped up. I hate to admit it, Mac Jones looked pretty good. What was supposed to be a very strong defense. He honestly, I don't know if it's more the Eagles were not at the level that they should be yet, or if Mac Jones really is starting to get more comfortable and step up. But in general, he looked a lot more confident and a better quarterback than he did literally all of last year. I know I'll get some dispute in this next one. I thought Trevor Lawrence looked awesome. The turnovers, I don't believe were his fault. It bounced off of Tank Bigsby's hand for an interception, and then the other one was a fumble from the blind side that Tank Bigsby was holding and then just didn't hold on to, and it turned into a fumble for a touchdown. But in general, he looked great, and one of the main reasons why I think he looks so good and ready to step up is the addition of Calvin Ridley to the arsenal. He was targeting Calvin Ridley early and often. Calvin Ridley looks like he's going to be that dude. Like, he looks like he hasn't missed a step. And we've seen this happen when you add an elite wide receiver to a quarterback. They level up, and I'm expecting the same type of level up for Trevor Lawrence this year. Any thoughts on the Trevor Lawrence before I move on to a couple other guys that I thought stepped up?
No, I had Ridley on my list, honestly, but I figured that I would leave the Jaguars.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Like, the thing about Lawrence is 7 or 8 rush attempts. He ran a lot of Clemson. I think that was something that used to be in his arsenal a lot. If he does end up rushing for, if he's averaging 5 to 10 rush attempts and something like 40 to 60 rush yards a game, that is going to be pretty big game changer in terms of his fantasy output. I thought he played an okay game. I thought that Ridley looked great. I think he looked about as consistent, as solid as he looked in the second half of last year, which is strong. I wouldn't say elite. I wouldn't say top tier, but he looked very good.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and I swear this isn't piping up my team, but I also thought Anthony Richardson looked very good and should probably be one of the favorites for Rookie of the Year at this point. Main reason I'm calling this out now is because we'll get into the disappointed section a little bit, and I thought he was the only rookie quarterback who actually looked pretty strong. Obviously, not perfect by any means, but you saw his rushing abilities come through for fantasy.
It's pretty much just the rushing ability, though, right? Like, what we thought about Anthony Richardson's accuracy and ability to overthrow receivers was confirmed on multiple occasions in the game. But the rushing adds a huge dynamic for both fantasy and the Colts offense. So
I don't disagree with that, but what I will say is I don't think he looked worse as a passer than C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, who both looked horrible.
That's completely accurate.
Yeah. So when you compare it to the rookie quarterbacks, which I was saying, and you throw the rushing, I thought he looked easily the best of the three. Got to call out Zay Flowers.
Yeah,
looks like that dude.
Yeah,
I think he had a 40% market share in first game as a rookie. That's out of control, and he looked good doing it. And I believe he's a Boston College boy, so got to give Joey props to his alum. And finally, Brandon Ayuk. People have been talking about him potentially being a wide receiver one. I know. And I'll get into this later as well, but Matt Harmon, who does reception perception, is a guy I trust a lot, and I think he's one of the best in the business. He's always been saying that you could be a wide receiver one, but obviously there's a lot of other weapons there. Game one, he looked like it. Like, he was making big plays, getting open, and blocking. I think he absolutely lit a guy up on the CMC play as well. So he's becoming a full-rounded wide receiver. So I thought he stepped up big there and potentially could be one of the biggest breakouts this year.
Yeah, he looked really, really good and definitely could make that, upper tier of wide receivers going forward if he continues what he did in week 1. So definitely very positive for him.
And to that point, Brock Purdy really just didn't.
Yeah.
It's hard to discount. I mean, he was making some great throws all game. And, I think Ayuk was 7 for 7 or 8 for 8. That doesn't happen unless you've got a quarterback who's making pretty good throws out there too. So
Purdy looked great, actually. No one really talks about him as a fantasy option. He's always been viewed more as game manager, but he had some big cojones throws in there. The one touchdown to Ayuk where Scott, that was a big boy throw. So that I definitely see that, and especially coming off the injury, making plays like that already is pretty impressive.
Yeah, completely agree.
And for a less exciting point, let's talk about the laundry list of disappointments from this week. Joe, you want to start with this one?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the one that's probably front and center for a lot of people's minds are the Bengals, Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Mark Chase. And the biggest question to me is Joe Burrow healthy? Right? I think that one of the biggest things that I'm looking forward to seeing, I know there's a rush right now to grab the Browns defense in fantasy, and the Browns defense is getting a lot of credit, but Are we how much credit are we giving the Browns defense for what transpired in that game versus the weather and the fact that Burrow is likely playing on a bum calf? And from the first throw of the game, it just didn't seem like he was good. A couple of the guys that I was with was like, Burrow's not healthy, right? We all agree he's not healthy, but it doesn't really seem like that's being talked about very much. It seems like a lot of the credit for how everything went is going to the Browns D. So I'm curious. I mean, it wasn't good by any stretch, but even in instances where Burrow was not really feeling the heat, he wasn't making very good throws. I think the first throw of the game he kind of made on 2 feet, and it was like a duck. Like I'm like, did it slip out of his hand? So he didn't seem right from the beginning. It was really bizarre. So that was one, and obviously the Giants offense. I'll leave that one. The specific details there. I mean, they looked completely inept. And again, curious. I was high on Dallas's defense coming into the season, and I'm not totally sure that this isn't a situation where Dallas just doesn't have an absolutely elite defense. And if you're the Giants and you get behind very quickly, they can pin their ears back, and Micah Parsons can kind of just come at you full speed. Like there's not really much you can do. So I think there'll probably be better days ahead for the Giants offense, but I also think that Dallas's defense is going to be a problem for whoever they face this year.
If you took a picture of me for the watching the last Giants playoff game last year and a picture of me watching the first Giants game this year, it's the identical picture. I was just depressed laying on the couch being from the start, like this stinks, but I have to sit here for another couple hours for this game to end knowing it's a disaster. So it was just gross. The whole offense, Joe. Like there's no even point getting into any player. The whole team was a joke.
Yeah, it did not look good. My bold prediction of Daniel Jones finishing top 3 is definitely in jeopardy after 1 week. He did not look good, but I do think there are better days ahead for them. So
like this week, much different defense this week.
Yeah, definitely this week. And then another one for me was the Chiefs wide receivers. Obviously Tony, couple hit him right in the hands, dropped one, literally went for a pick 6. They looked terrible. They looked lost without Kelsey, but they do get Kelsey back, so I don't think there's too much concern there. And then on the opposite side of the Packers game, the Bears disappointed. Fields just did not look good. 1 passing touchdown, interception, fumble. Everyone had these high hopes that he was going to take this Jalen Hurts leap. And I know it was only 1 week, but it just didn't look like he was even close to taking it in the passing game. Still had 59 rushing yards, but I thought it was pretty disappointing for where he was being drafted.
Yeah, I mean, there's a list of quarterbacks that just were bad this week. I know you guys mentioned Burrow and Fields. Fields does not look like he's taken the step so far, but Josh Allen looked completely erratic last night. It was a disaster. Like he made everything seem harder than it had to be on every single play. Hurts did not look like Hurts of last season either. Don't have as many concerns there, but he disappointed from a fantasy perspective, and he wasn't really running the ball that much. Lamar looked horrible.
Lamar looked bad.
Zay was great, but aside from that, the Ravens offense, it was an easy matchup, but still, he did not look great. Geno, who's supposed to be, looked like Geno of old, basically. Like it looked like last year was an aberration, but we'll see. He's got so many weapons. You hope he takes a step up. Dak, more of a product of probably the fact that the Giants got trucked. But hard to say. And as I mentioned, 2 other rookie quarterbacks, in Bryce Young and Stroud, just looked like they were rookies, basically.
Why do you say that after week 1, who are you happy that you have as your quarterback? Is Tua the only one?
Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence. Okay.
And Herbert was okay. I'm not concerned about Herbert, so I still think Herbert had a solid game and looks good enough. Obviously, I don't think he was mid-season form yet, but I think you'd be pretty comfortable with him. And Mahomes, once he gets Kelsey back, I think he'll be okay.
I don't think you're worried with Mahomes, but it's a short list of who you're happy with.
I'm not necessarily sure you're worried. with Mahomes, but I think the thing that I kind of like can't shake coming out of week one is between Kansas City and Philadelphia. Both of them lost coordinators in the offseason, and both of them looked kind of lost on offense, and Philly on defense too a little bit in the second half of that game. But on offense, right? Like maybe we're just underestimating how much changing offensive coordinators of an impact that's going to have, maybe even specifically early in the season. But, it's a lot of change for both of those teams. And
Lamar too, new offensive
yeah, that's true.
coordinator. Yeah,
So I'm not 100% sure that I would.
and Dak.
After watching the Thursday night game with KC and Detroit, I'm like, I kind of walked away from that. Like, is this going to be Kansas City's offense this year where they're going to kind of struggle, and then every once in a while Mahomes is going to make a couple ridiculous throws and they're going to score points in bunches, but it's not. I don't know that it's going to be the reliable, consistent production that it's been um, historically with that offense this year. We'll see. We'll see when Kelsey's back, but.
Yeah, I think Kelsey makes a big difference. It could be a step down, but I don't think we can make that judgment until Kelsey's back because I really think he's that much of a difference maker.
Oh, 100%. But it does prove that wide receivers having talent there matters, which is sad when you see a team that has talent at wide receiver just not use them, like Drake London. What is going on in Atlanta? The guy, I thought he was hurt because I saw a 0 there. And I'm like, oh, that can maybe happen. But it was one target. I'm like, how did he have one target? I think they threw the ball 18 times, and he had no catches and put up a goose. T. Higgins had a goose as well on 8 targets, but that was more, it looked like Burrow was hurt. So, like, well, maybe I'll write that one up. But London, you got to be terrified this year if you have him. He's so talented. Hopefully things step up in the future. But this season, it's going to be rough down there. And as far as and they won.
That's the worst thing. If you have Pitts or London or they won, they're happy with how things went, and yeah.
That's twofold. That means that they're not going to change their philosophy moving forward, but they're also not going to be bad enough to draft a quarterback. So like they're going to win a lot of games, and yeah, I just don't know. I feel like they're going to be in purgatory forever. Because they had early draft picks and they used it on running backs and wide receivers, tight ends, and just they don't use them. I guess we'll get into the usage on Bijan as well, which I got snake bitten with in my other dynasty league, but devastating. But not as devastating as what happened to Rodgers and Dobbins. Everyone knows at this point both tore their Achilles. Both devastating injuries for both players for separate reasons. Obviously, Dobbins just got back from a terrible ACL injury last year, started looking like himself, was poised for a huge game, had a touchdown, should have had another one, and he's on the final year of his contract, and he's just never getting paid again, which that is just, you feel for the guy because he was upset with his contract before the season started, and now you see why. And Rodgers, obviously, I don't think there's ever been more hype about a player going to a new team. He had Hard Knocks, and we even saw with the Jets winning, they have talent everywhere. And it would have been so much fun. I don't think there is a single fan of football that was not excited to kind of see what this team could do. And it just sucks for football to see Rodgers get hurt, but that's definitely rough.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Bills-Jets game, most surprising game of the week, it could be of the year. It had a ton of hype. Rodgers, Allen, Monday Night Football. Game starts, Rodgers goes down on the 4th snap. But then everyone's assuming game over. Zach Wilson's coming in, and Josh Allen throws 3 interceptions, fumbles twice, and all of a sudden the game's in overtime, and it ends with the Jets on a walk-off punt return. Just an unbelievable game. But like you said, you got to feel for Rodgers and Jets fans there because they have a defense that could take them to the Super Bowl. And, it seems like their plan will likely be to continue on with Zach Wilson. And, I don't know if he can carry that offense there, but they definitely have the defense.
Yeah. I am devastated. So devastated that going into that going into the game and going into the season, multiple times I had the thought of, I'm just so damn excited to see kind of how Rodgers looks on this offense. And I had the thought to myself, like, it'll just be a shame if he has to miss significant time, or if any of them go down, if Garrett Wilson gets hurt early, if Rodgers gets hurt early. And he got taken down on the third play of the game too. And I was kind of just like, ooh, that was close, It just sucks. It really, like Dave said, it's, if you're a fan of football, you kind of want to see when a bunch of offensive talent is assembled like that, especially after, first play of the game, Brees Hall rips off a 26-yard rush, and you're just like, damn, this offense is going to be awesome. And that's it. It's over before it even starts. So, and then on the other side of the ball, just to kind of piggyback too, you made a comment earlier that kind of resonated in terms of Dave, in terms of Josh Allen looking erratic. I'm not really sure exactly what's going on with Josh Allen, but he didn't look himself, and I'm wondering if it's one of those situations where you're playing a video game and you make it really, really far. You almost beat the final boss, right? But then you die and you got to go back to like the beginning. And then you play it again with like a little less focus, but you're just like, all right,
You need like a break before you start doing it again too.
I'm going to do this, right? And then you get close to where you got the first time, but then you die again. By the third or fourth time, you're just kind of like, fuck this, just going balls to the wall, just kind of like running through, just like, because you can't be bought. Maybe that's a situation where Allen's just like starting to get a little impatient with the fact that they've come so close and they've had these teams that are Super Bowl caliber teams, and they keep coming up short. He's got to get the mindset right, because it seems like the hero ball, like not only the throws deep, but just kind of like laying his body out there, which has been
unnecessary.
Yeah, like, I mean, every single year we go into the season with Bill's coaching and management saying, Josh isn't going to run as much, and then he throws himself out there like he's going to end up being the next one suffering a major injury. So just not great vibes in Buffalo, but credit to the Jets. They're a great team, and we'll see what they can do without a quarterback.
And speaking of another just overall bad team, from week one at least, the Steelers just looked real bad. I think that, again, better days ahead, but they did also lose Deontay Johnson to a pretty bad hamstring injury for at least a month. So,
and I was sure that's going to help. He was the lone bright spot. I thought he actually looked pretty good to start the game, and then he went down, and that's unfortunate as well, because I was high on him in this year, so that really stinks.
Yeah, and that might just be a 49ers thing.
I think
the Niners defense might just be that good, but Kenny Pickett did not look great either. So
yeah, I think they'll be better, but the Niners defense did them no favors in that one. And I guess some final notes, just a couple surprises for me. The Bijan Algier split. So I own Bijan in another Dynasty league. I was playing against Algier, and I lost by 0.12. Because Algier got all the freaking work and the touchdowns in there. But Bijan got more of the receptions, and I'm not overly concerned about Bijan, but the fact that they're still going to give this much work to Algier, I guess it's because they're just not thrown to London. But it definitely shows that Algier will have some value, and it's just overall infuriating for me if you have Bijan in general, because if you got all that work that you thought, like, Bijan would have had the biggest day of the week of any player out there. And Gibbs too, just on piggyback on the rookies, that one I get a little bit more, but just seeing these highly drafted running backs, you thought they'd get a lot more usage than they would in week one. But I get it; it was a opening night primetime game against the defending champ, so I get why you stick with the vet. But those are just two more call-outs I want to throw out there.
Yeah, I mean the Bijan one is just concerning because it was a foregone conclusion by everyone that Algier would barely touch the field and was nothing more than a handcuff insurance policy. So, he did rush for 1,000 yards last year, and to see them use him this much in week one, long term, I think, Robinson's still highly thought of, but it could definitely be a little concerning this season that it's much more of a timeshare than people thought it was going to be.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of the beginning of last season for Brees Hall, where he was kind of sharing the work, but he obviously looked like the more explosive back. And not to take anything away from the way Algier looked, because honestly, he actually did look really good. I'm not as concerned about Bijan going forward. You know, he got by far the most targets on the team. So
Yeah, including wide receivers.
Yeah, would much rather own him than anybody else in that offense.
And he looked like his touchdown. That was an incredible play.
Yeah,
so
it really was.
You saw the flashes of greatness there, and you know he's going to be good.
Yeah.
Well, now moving on. This is a league-specific podcast initially, so do want to quickly give a run-through of how our league results ended up for the week. So I'm just going to quickly run through our scores here. So in week 1, some of the matchups that we had myself against Harrison DaCosta. I came out on top by a margin of about 20 points. Matty Rowe beat the Clark and Clark brother-in-law, if you will. Canellis came up just short against Caffer and Mike Williams. Ryan, we'll get into this in a bit, but Ryan and his brother, not a great game, and got beat down by Adam Cohen.
It was a massacre.
And Cats. Yeah, it was a massacre, and one that I think we're going to be referencing for most of the season. Schluter edged out Joey, and Joey did put up a pretty good fight. I think he was right in the middle of the pack as scoring goes. And Scott came up short against Crope, who I believe was the top dog. But there was, I think I mentioned this in our league chat. There were 4 teams separated by like less than 0.4 points. 2 teams, actually me and I think the Clark Bros had the exact same score. So it was kind of a weird the distribution of points in there. But main reason I want to call that out, so I know a lot of leagues, they do weekly highs. But for us, rather than paying at the high score each week, at the end of the season, whatever team scored the highest score of any week gets a payout for that. So we're going to track whoever has the highest score every single week. And for this week, it was Kropa, who had 128.34 points. But the wrinkle that we also have in this league is that whoever scores the lowest points in any given week for the entire year, so whoever has the worst week, they're going to be funding our Toilet Bowl championship. So we have our Toilet Bowl, and if you win that, it's a way for the teams who missed the playoffs to still feel like they're playing for something. They do have a cash prize for winning that, and it is funded by whoever has the worst week of the entire season. And so it makes it a little fun because each week you're going to be hoping you're either the highest score, or if you have the highest score, that no one beats yours. But if you have the lowest score, you hope someone beats you on that, or that you never get anywhere near there. So for our first lowest score, it was the Wilkinson brothers at a very lowly, this would be a great golf score, 63.14. And mind you, we have 3 flex and 2 quarterbacks. So there's 10 roster spots. So they average 6.3 with 2 quarterbacks on the roster. So this is definitely going to be one that I think might be sticking around for multiple weeks, and definitely will provide a lot of entertainment for the league. So if you're listening, this is just a fun wrinkle. Maybe you can throw it into your leagues going forward as well. But we'll keep you updated on how it's trending. But Ryan, any words on that?
I mean, what can I say? It was a rough first week of Dynasty. First Dynasty league ever. Definitely did not go as planned. I knew we were in trouble when Thursday night ended, and we had, I think it was 0.3 total points from 2 players. I knew we were in trouble, but then it just got even worse on Sunday. Really, no one did anything. Jalen Hurts a little bit. Josh Allen looked terrible and was all over, and still was one of the highest scores on our team. So that shows you how rough it was. I'm sure the both of you have some stuff to say, though. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I just want to point out the ironic fact that is, do you know who on Ryan's entire roster, both starters and bench, who his team's high scorer was for the week?
Kyron, right?
Kyron Williams.
Kyron Williams. That's the lone bright spot. We at least have him on our bench somehow because, I
was going to let Joe talk about him later, but yes, that is ironic.
It's not a terrible situation, right? Like, we know
it's pretty bad.
likely there's a brighter future ahead
I know
for
there definitely
Allen
is.
and Hurts. Lazard, maybe not so much. Actually, that's a tough break there. But
Yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't positive. Lazard, loses his quarterback. Um, you know, it, it was
it was just one of
all
those
around.
weeks. It was just
Yeah.
one of those weeks
It
in our
was.
other dynasty that I reference a couple times where I have, 2 out of 3 years champion with Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. I'm pretty sure I put up a similarly paltry score in that league this week. It's just, sometimes it happens, and maybe you'll
Yeah,
be able to shake it off. You got to get Kyron in the starting lineup going forward.
Yeah.
he will be. It's only up from here. That's the positive.
Well, I guess that's a great segue because into our next part of some dynasty targets, and these could also be waiver targets in redraft. But in dynasty, waivers are pretty thin. There's basically no one on there to really acquire. So when you're looking at a dynasty, you should be looking more at who can you acquire cheap from other teams' benches. Although when you are looking at like redraft waiver wire advice and like at other websites or content you're getting out there, those are pretty good references to kind of see what players you could be targeting because those are likely guys on the bench of other teams that are now starting to have a path for opportunities on the playing field. So that's where you can get a lot of additional content that maybe not be dynasty specific. But Joe just referenced the big one, Kyron Williams. So you know what, Joe, I'll give you the kind of because you've been banging the Kyron drum. I've been a complete disbeliever, and I ate it this week. Still don't think he's great, but at running back, it's all about opportunity, and he's getting the opportunity. So it's hard to really argue against you right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've been big on him just for the possibility that Cam Akers doesn't really have the juice anymore this year. I was surprised that he was able to put it together as well as he did towards the end of last year, and produced as much for fantasy and for the Rams as he did. I think it's interesting right now with Williams and Akers because they're at San Francisco next week. But either way, they're playing against San Francisco.
Doesn't really matter where it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. And again, right? what's I guess promising about Kyron is that he's a good pass catcher. He got the pass catching work, but he was also getting carries early on in the game too. So that being said, right, Sean
And the goal
McVay,
line too, which is like
yeah,
smallest goal line back in the league.
yeah. But Sean McVay is extremely, extremely erratic with his running back usage, and if this coming Sunday against San Fran, it was Akers for the first 3 quarters, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think the thing with Kyron is, like you said, the opportunity is clearly there. I was happy to see that he did something with it, and maybe we got ourselves somebody who can be a RB2 flex-ish player for the majority of the season. That would be nice.
My only concern with it, and you kind of touched on it, is I feel like just because this happened in week one, it's not guaranteed to happen with Sean McVay. I mean, Cam Akers had 0 points in week one last year, if I'm remembering correctly. And then, second half of the season, he was a league winner. So I'm happy to have Kyron, but still a little concerned that it's going to kind of be all over the place throughout the season.
Yeah, the one point, I guess, in Kyron's favor, McVay clearly hates Cam Akers. They hated each other all last year. That's why he was not getting any work. And then they seemingly made up, but it was more of just like there was no one left. So they're like, I guess we got to use Cam Akers. I believe Kyron was hurt most of last year. So that's why he wasn't really in the mix. So this year, maybe we should have realized McVay. I mean, whatever. McVay just hates Cam Akers. There's just no way around it, I guess.
Yeah.
But I guess sticking with the Rams, if you look at any waiver column, Puka Nacua is going to be the top name on the list. He had 15 targets, dominated. He's a rookie, and you don't really see rookies dominate like that. And you earn targets, so to get 15 targets and to dominate with them is pretty huge. But honestly, in Dynasty, I doubt you're going to get him if you unless you overpay because he's a rookie. He's in our league. He's probably on taxi squad. which makes it even harder to sell. But when you draft a rookie, especially as late as Puka went in drafts, he was like probably like at best third round, maybe even later. You become way too infatuated with hitting a player like that. But I do think if you own him, you should definitely listen to offers in case someone is willing to overpay for him. But I will say, again, I mentioned Matt Harmon, Reception Perception. Love the guy. He's got a good podcast. If you get any of his content, I highly recommend it. He was high on Puka going into pre-draft. And he actually sees a lot of similar traits in Puka that Cooper Kupp has. Not saying he's Cooper Kupp, but he has a lot of similar traits in the way he plays, which obviously McVay knows how to utilize. So who knows how long Kupp is out, but it does seem like Puka should be getting a lot of work in at least the next 3 weeks, and who knows what happens when Kupp comes back. So it's almost this weird balance where like it might be okay to overpay depending on what it is, because he's definitely going to get work. But I don't know what your guys' thoughts on Puka are.
It's interesting because I feel like everyone kind of wrote the Rams off when Cooper Kupp, was out and injured, and no one really thought about, the other receivers and kind of thought it'd be a dumpster fire like it was last year, but they looked really, really good in week one. And now you have a guy like Puka that's, potentially taking over that Cooper Kupp role while he's out. And we've seen how valuable that can be. So like you said, I think it would be really, really hard to get him. If I had him, I wouldn't be giving him up, but see what someone offers. You never know.
Yeah, it's tough from a redraft perspective because I'm, obviously I think everybody's doing the same move tonight where they're trying to determine how much they're bidding for guys in redraft and whether to burn high priority on some of these guys. I might want to see it again before I were to invest. So let's put it this way: I don't know that I would be going to blow 20 or 30% of my fab to acquire a guy who is, like Ryan said, right? Like he's in an offense that we weren't really especially high on going into the year, and
Cooper Kupp
he'll be back.
Should come back, and so who knows what his role looks like once Kupp's back.
I also say, if you're going to wait 1 week, it's a bad week to see how he does it because they are playing the 49ers, as we've mentioned.
Right. So that's the thing, right? If you are sold on him and you want to go in, you have to also know that it's probably not. You're probably not going to want to start him this week, right? I don't want to pay $30 or $35 a fab to pick up somebody just to stash him on the bench either. So, I'm not necessarily saying that I'm out from a dynasty standpoint. I'm definitively in. Like you said, I'd be more, if I owned him, I'd be more in a listening mode. I don't know that I'd want to go and try and acquire after just such a small sample size. And Tutu Atwell looked pretty good too. Van Jefferson, I don't know what the hell's going on with Van Jefferson, but
yeah, he's one of the guys that has had so many chances to do something and just never does.
Yeah. So it might not ever happen for him. So we'll see what happens. But yeah,
another guy who I actually personally love, but again, this is leaning more into my Steelers, Calvin Austin. Especially now, I don't know if you guys are going to be on him. Obviously, as I mentioned, Deontay's out, so Calvin's role should grow. He's fast. He had a great preseason. Everyone was hyping him up. And he actually ended up this past week 6 for 6 on 6 receptions, 6 targets, and 37 yards. Obviously, a rough defense. So I think that's actually pretty good stats coming in as the third wide receiver from the Steelers offense that week. But I think he could be poised for a ton of work going forward. And they get I think they should have much easier matchups going forward. So again, Deontay should be out multiple weeks. He's someone who I think you could probably still get a little cheap in Dynasty, and I don't even think people are going to be blowing that much money on him in redraft. So you could probably get him for like a couple bucks, or maybe even free on waivers. But that's just someone who I liked. I don't even know if I should wait to hear if you guys have any thoughts on him, but I'll throw it out. What do you guys think about Calvin Austin?
I was grabbing him. A couple of the guys on, fantasy footballers and some of the other, guys that I follow on Twitter were recommending him as like a last round pick in best ball. So I was grabbing him, and I really only knew of his existence as we were getting closer to the season for that reason.
Perfect dynasty grab.
Yeah. But that being said, Those targets are going to have to go to somebody. I know AB is trying to get the attention of the Steelers, but that's not going to happen. So, that being said, right, like he's a smaller guy. I wonder, I guess maybe he slides right into the Deontay role. It was interesting to see. I was expecting a little more from George Pickens week one. Maybe they get him more involved, but yeah, I think I'm with you. I'm similarly intrigued. I think there'll be a good opportunity for him, and he will likely be a much bigger part of the offense with Deontay not out there.
Another guy I like, I grabbed him actually in another Dynasty, I think it's like Dynasty Best Ball that I did with Joe, and like other Best Balls I'm in is Shaheed from the Saints in New Orleans. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's like the wide receiver 3 out of New Orleans. He was showing flashes at the end of last year for some long touchdowns, and he actually had 5 receptions for 89 yards and a score this past week. So he's definitely still getting involved. And you feel like Michael Thomas is probably going to get hurt eventually, and he'll probably slide into the wide receiver 2 spot eventually, and he'll really get a bigger role. But even if he doesn't, I still think as a wide receiver 3, he's going to be a pretty useful player and someone who probably shouldn't demand too much of a big offer to get back on your roster. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on Shaheed.
Yeah, I think he's on a lot of pickup lists for this week after week one. Like you said, if something happens to Michael Thomas, then that could be a huge stash for now, even if you don't start him. So he's definitely has some value there.
Yeah, I agree. I thought Michael Thomas looked good, but Shaheed looked good too, and he was getting his receptions. The majority of them were downfield, right? I think he had like of his 5 catches, it was like almost 20 yards per catch, which is nice. So
you love to see it.
Yeah.
And then a few other guys, this is where you start getting grimy, but these are guys that are definitely hot names on the waivers in redraft. They were likely someone on your bench who you were debating if you should cut or not. But Justice Hill and Gus Edwards, obviously the Dobbins going down, and Josh Kelly from the Chargers with Eckler potentially hobbled. I want to get your thoughts on those 3 players, how you rank them, because obviously in redraft people are trying to figure out the waivers, but if you're trying to target any of these guys, the biggest issue is like we don't know if these guys are actually valuable or not, or what they're going to do there. I personally think the Ravens are going to add another running back at some point, so it's hard for me to go big on either one of these guys, but I want to get your thoughts.
So I actually had Josh Kelly on my sleepers list that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So out of the 3, I would go after him. He had 16 rushes for 91 yards and a touchdown in week 1, and that was with Eckler out there. And I don't know exactly what's going on, but it seems like Eckler could be a little hurt. So regardless, he's a huge handcuff, and the sky's the limit for him if Eckler does go down and miss any time this year. So I think he is a must-have if you're in a redraft league. He's definitely someone you should think about stashing on your bench. And then I agree with you on the Ravens. I think there's definitely potential that they go out and grab someone else. So I'm not confident spending a ton to get either one of those guys. Plus, who knows between the 2 who ends up being the go-to guy that you want to start every week. So
yeah, between the 2 Ravens backs, I would prefer Edwards. It seems like he's more likely to be the every down back. I think Justice Hill is historically profiled a little bit more as a pass catching back. He did get the touchdowns last week, but between the 2, I think Gus probably has a more secure workload going forward. I agree. I would put Josh Kelly first. I think the Chargers have been saying for years that they're trying to reduce Eckler's volume. He's known to be somewhat injury prone, and he's also kind of getting up there in age. He's getting very, very dangerously close to that running back cliff in terms of age. I think he's 28, which is 27, 28. 28 is generally like the cliff. So I think he's kind of at it right now. So Josh Kelly hasn't always impressed me. I've had in a couple dynasty leagues, so I've kind of been paying attention to him, and I feel
kind of like Van Jefferson, but very surprised to see him step up.
I feel like week 1 was by far his best performance that he's ever had. But I think of all of those guys, I think realistically, and I'm not saying this to be funny, I think I'd probably rather have Kyron Williams than any of those guys. I think that he probably has the easiest or the most he has a more secure pathway to kind of like a stranglehold on a lead back role with touchdown upside, with pass catching, without really needing anybody to get hurt ahead of him. So I think I'd probably prefer. And if he's available, I think I'm in on. I hate to say it, but I think I'm in on Kenneth Gainwell, which is tough because I was completely out on the Eagles' backfield going into this season, figuring that they were going to be it was going to be 6 or 7 carries for Gainwell and 6 for Swift and 4 for Boston Scott. And turns out it's a lot of Gainwell, and he looked pretty good. I mean, granted, I think they've been holding him out of practice the last 2 days, but he's a guy that I think I'm considering. There's one league where he's available where I'm considering dropping a 20 or 30% of Fab on, because it's worth the shot that if they're going to give him the lion's share of the carries, you could get, fourth, fifth round, an early to mid round running back. That's just kind of how it goes, right? Like after week 1 every year, there's always a couple guys who are like, oh, well, we didn't really know that guy was going to be the guy, but he is. So he's probably, I don't know if you guys agree. I'd be curious to get your thoughts because I'm kind of waffling a little bit, but I think I'm going
to. We actually, in a redraft with and Ryan, I took him with the last pick, and I said, I can't believe the starting running back for the Eagles is still available in the final round, and snagged him. Penny was a healthy scratch, and Swift got, I think, 1 target maybe, or 1 run. Wasn't involved at all. So it wasn't even just that Kenny got a lot of work. Those other guys were just not even options. So I would feel pretty confident about going for him.
Yeah, I mean, Swift played 19 snaps. I had him on my stay away list. So, you got to be super happy if you have Gainwell. And if it stays like that going forward, there's huge value there. I guess you'd have to assume there is a little concern, that some of those other guys do get some more snaps. They were listing all of them at starters at one point. I don't know if that was just a gimmick or if they were really thinking that way, but after 1 week, I don't know if I would go crazy for him, but it does seem like he's the guy. So
crazy that a starter was a healthy scratch. So yeah, that was definitely posturing. Yeah. I think.
Gainwell or Algier at this point, rest of season, if you have to choose.
Algier, right? Probably just based on the offense.
Yeah,
because they just run so much. But
and he doesn't have the factor of his quarterback potentially
siphoning
touchdowns from him in the red zone. Yeah.
Yeah, and a couple other names. These are rookies, so again, they're a little tougher because people still have the emotional attachment on them from drafting. But they didn't really smash week 1, so I think there is some opportunity to potentially prime away. But I think Roschon Johnson, Sean Tucker, and Tajay Spears all have the potential to really get a lot of work going forward and potentially taking over the job. Obviously, Tajay Spears is going to be more based on injury, but Derrick Henry, as Joe mentioned, did not look great week 1, and Tajay Spears, I think, outsnapped him this week. So that was pretty big. Rachaad White looks like just an average guy, which is what I've been staying away from Rachaad White because I just did not believe in him. And Roschon Johnson looked legit, and he was the backup in college, but he was the backup to Bijan, which apparently Algier is better than Roschon, but Roschon should still be useful there. But I don't know if you guys have thoughts on those 3 rookies.
Yeah, curious, Ryan, what your thoughts are on the shots being fired at Rachaad White, your RB2.
My team's taking a lot of shots over here, but it's well deserved after our performance in week 1. I mean, look, it's concerning. Sean and I did want to grab Tucker in the rookie draft. He ended up getting picked.
Syracuse alums
for us. Yeah, we're Syracuse fans, so we were hoping to grab him. It's definitely concerning. I'm not sold that he completely takes over the role at any point this year, but it's not great. I'm not going to lie. The most surprising one to me, though, was Derrick Henry and Spears. I didn't pay a ton of attention to that game. I don't know if you guys noticed anything more, but I mean, he outsnapped him. That seems pretty crazy to me.
Yeah, he didn't get a ton of touches, but he was on the field a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah, they looked very, very poor.
Yeah.
It's just going to be, I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, I'm less confident in that offense now after seeing week 1. And if the offense is bad and they're not winning games, how involved is Derrick Henry going to be? And it might just be a situation where kind of what we feared about Henry might be coming true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before moving on to our concerns, one final guy who I would potentially target, he's not on waiver list because this guy's universally owned, but I still think his perceived value is lower than what I think it should be, is James Cook. I think he was on the field a ton. He was clearly going to be the lead workhorse back for the Bills. And that game was bad for the Bills, so I think that kind of suppresses his value. So I think if you were going to pounce on an opportunity to upgrade your RB2 to someone who will be potentially high in RB2, I think James Cook should be a good target there.
Yeah, I actually agree with that one. He looked like he's going to have a bell cow role this year, so that's huge.
Yeah, he looked great.
Yeah.
Involved in the pass catching, getting a ton of carries, and it looked explosive against Jets defense that's very, very quick laterally, and it was I was encouraged.
Yeah. And then finally, some concern players. I think we hit basically all these players as well, but just want to relist them again. I guess, Ryan, I know you have a couple on your item, and then Joe, you can hop in. But who are some guys that you're concerned about and you kind of want to cut bait on?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on a lot of them already. So some of the guys I'm concerned with, not cutting bait on, but Josh Allen, we've talked about it. He just looked all over the place and didn't look like himself. Again, Robinson, I'm just a little concerned with Algier there. I do kind of agree with what Joe said, though. I think as the season progresses, it could sway a little more towards Robinson. So we'll see, but a little concerning. And then we talked about Drake London. You got to be super concerned that Ritter's going to be the quarterback the rest of the year. And I just don't see how he can get it done if that's his quarterback.
Yeah, for me, Geno Smith. I have Geno Smith in a couple of different places, and in one league I'm starting him. In another two leagues I have him as a backup. Drafted Deshaun Watson, who I was less confident in, and I'm in those leagues where I have other quarterback options, I think I'm probably cutting him right up for waiver wire guys this week. It's a little concerning because he has a whole career of data, preceding last year where he was mediocre to average, and last year obviously was well above average, but we'll see. That could just be a knee-jerk reaction. I'm also concerned about Dameon Pierce, and it's not necessarily a Pierce thing, but it's more so like if CJ Stroud can't move the ball, is Dameon Pierce going to be able to, score touchdowns? And is that the type of, is that the type of back that, like, he wasn't on the field a ton once they were down. And, I was big on him. His touchdown scorer prop was, I think, like 2-1 to score. And I was kind of beating that drum hard all of Sunday morning. Like, he's the most likely person to score a touchdown on their whole team. How could he possibly be 2-1? And that was exactly why he was 2-1, because they barely moved the ball. They barely got into the.
No one's going to score a touchdown on that team.
Yeah. It was bad. So we'll see, right? Just 1 week, but those are the two that come to my mind.
Yeah, Pierce, I get. I have him in redraft. I still think he'd be good. The Ravens D is not an easy matchup, but the Texans offense looked putrid. So it's a little worrisome there. I mean, for me, we've said it many times, but Drake London. If I'm in redraft, I am trying to get whatever I can from him. In Dynasty, I am actually looking to see if I can get it because he still has pretty high perceived Dynasty value. But as I mentioned, I don't know when the quarterback situation is going to get better there. I don't know when the offensive philosophy is going to improve there. He has the talent, and I think that's how you sell it. But I would probably try to sell it for someone who has similar talent, but a much better opportunity. I wouldn't be selling him at like 50 cents on the dollar, but I would definitely be looking to see if I can get someone who I could actually use and has a decent future outlook. Akers, I don't really know if you can get anything for him right now. You just got to kind of wait, and hopefully he has a good game here and there, and then try to flip him. So that's more of a hold. But if you can get anything for him, I'd start trying to get feelers out there. And Fields is someone who I still think you could probably get a good return on, but because people are viewing him as like a top 7, top 8 quarterback. And he's going to have blow up games, but I just don't think he's ever getting better from where he is. Like, I truly think he's kind of not a great passer. He'll be a good rusher, but I also don't know if the Bears are going to stick with him long term from a dynasty perspective, because I think it's 11 straight games they've lost now. So they don't care about fantasy points; they care about production on the field and winning. So I do have a concern that Fields maybe not a long term quarterback for the Bears, and then you're going to be in a weird situation holding the bag on that. I don't know if those are spicy takes for any of you guys, but that's just kind of where I'm at.
No, I think that's a really good point with Fields. They're not winning real life games, right? So at some point they're going to have to do something. And if Fields can't actually win a football game, he has all this upside in fantasy because of his rushing ability. But if that's not winning them the football games, there's some real concern there that something happens to his job security at some point.
They debated trading him and keeping the first pick too. So like they ultimately traded the pick, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sold on him long term.
Yeah, I agree. I would also throw out anybody on Carolina's offense.
Jeez.
Yeah. And
that team is just bad.
And we've talked a lot about Denver on this pod. I'm a Russell Wilson owner. I thought they looked barely passable. Could have been a lot worse. Could have certainly been a lot better. So I'm hoping to see a little bit more from them moving forward too. Not exactly cutting bait yet. If in my situation with Russ, I'm riding him out at this point with Kyler still on the IR.
Yeah, don't really have other options, unfortunately.
And if you're in redraft and you're starting Russ, then you could probably find better options.
Yeah, I hope it's like a 20-team league if you have Russ as your starting quarterback after the draft.
Yeah.
But I guess looking ahead to week 2, obviously we got some data points from week 1. What are you guys thinking or excited to see from week 2? I mean, for me, I'm expecting a couple big bounce backs from a number of teams that really disappointed. I think the Giants should bounce back. They're playing the Cards. I think they're 4-point road favorites potentially. The Seahawks get the Lions. I want to see that offense get on track. The Bills get the Raiders. I think the Bills are going to be very motivated, and I think they could go put up a lot of points on the Raiders. And the Ravens, should be getting Mark Andrews back, so hopefully that offense starts clicking a little bit. Also, I'm very interested to see how Zach Wilson handles the Cowboys, who just dismantled my Giants. I think that is going to be a bloodbath. And as far as like watching things, Josh Kelly's usage, we kind of alluded to that before, kind of see if that is fool's gold or not, and kind of how the Ravens backfield shakes out. But I don't know if there's any other thoughts you guys have for week 2.
Yeah, we touched on most of what I had. The only other thing that I wanted to mention is I feel like there were a lot of concerns for Kenneth Walker going into the season. I think, Dave, even at one point you were a little down on him. But it seems like that was kind of overblown. Charbonnet only touched the ball 3 times in week 1, and it seems like he's going to be the guy there. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. And the rest of it we've mostly touched on throughout this pod. I'm really interested to see in what quarterbacks step it up in week 2. It just seemed like such a down week for fantasy quarterbacks.
Yeah, I would say most intriguing match. Well, from a fantasy perspective, I'm curious to see how the Rams offense, how their weapons end up looking coming back this week against San Francisco, a much more formidable defense. Does Kyron, my man, does he come through again with another productive day? Does Puka end up repeating his double-digit targets? And does Higbee get more involved? And does Van Jefferson get, brought back from the dead? So it'll be interesting to see.
I'm going to say Van does not.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Yeah. Another guy who tragically died before the beginning of the games this weekend that I'm hoping to see come back next week is Dallas Goedert. So hopefully on Thursday night.
Yeah.
Another goose we forgot about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that I picked him early in our tight end premium dynasty league just for him to give me a big fat goose and potentially, yeah, I mean, if I had to point the finger at one specific person on the squad who blew it against Schluter this week, it's it's clearly him. So
yeah, that's one thing we forgot to mention. Tight ends across the board were just bad. Like It didn't really matter who you started, which was fine because you didn't really lose an edge against anyone I guess you played against, but it would just disappoint, especially if you use like high or early round draft capital on like a Goddard or Goddard, or I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But yeah, that's because like I think Hunter Henry was like the tight end one this week, which I did have him in best ball, but I don't think was in any true redraft teams.
Yeah. It was interesting to see Kelsey and Andrews were out. Who else? Who else do you start? And it turned out basically it didn't matter.
No one.
Not Isaiah Likely. Jesus.
Yeah. And I had high hopes for Dalton Kincaid. And how many freaking balls are we going to throw to Dawson Knox? Dawson Knox caught 5 balls last night, and I just don't understand why you use that draft pick on Dalton Kincaid and have him out there constantly just to throw the ball to Dawson Knox 9 times. So
the high profile rookies, like I know Ryan talked about Charbonnet, like all the early running backs, they're like easing everyone in. Like they're just except for if you get someone like a Puka, you're just like no, hammer him, just like throw him the ball. A guy you got like the 4th, 5th round. It was definitely weird usage, but tight end like Donald Parham got all the looks in the Chargers. Like it was just whatever. No one did good in tight end this past week, so hopefully better days ahead there.
Yep.
But with that, that is our pods. We got week 2 coming up. We'll be on the pod again a week from today. But thank you guys for listening. Good luck on your matchups. Good luck on your waiver pickups and any trades. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Later, guys.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the NSFW Dynasty Podcast. Tune in next time.